Anders' simulation is in full effect, and tomorrow we will see Gambit, obviously the majority Kazakhstani team, face off versus the Brazilian little brother in Immortals in a major final. Now, what in the fuck? How did that happen? Who the fuck knows? Well, actually, I have an inkling, so I thought I'd just go through in this video why both teams are here and who I think will eventually be crowned the kings of CSGO, at least at this major. So, I need to preface this by saying that none of these teams, apart from Gambit in a best-of-3 versus Astralis, really had that big of an issue getting here. I mean, the teams they faced off, barely. I mean, Gambit were the only ones who obviously faced Astralis, and yes, they beat them in a best-of-3, but we'll talk about that later. But none of them really played any top-tier teams, and obviously it's not their fault. Who would have known that, well, first of all, SK would draw Astralis in the quarterfinals and that FaZe would bomb out the way they did, as well as G2 showing up with, barely any T-side. So clearly not their fault, of course. But yeah, their road to the final isn't really the likes of which we've seen earlier, especially, going all the way back to MLG Columbus, in which, I thought the playoff bracket was superb. One of the best. Obviously, the final was underwhelming, apart from that first game. Then, of course, LG beating Navi on Overpass 16-3 or whatever the hell it was. But anyways, the video is not about MLG Columbus. But, I mean, talk about a contrast in terms of playoff brackets. I think pretty much all playoff brackets prior to this one have been somewhat sane, and the group stage. I mean, this is a problem with Swiss system. Obviously a video in itself, but it is proven here that, well, basically, with the system that we have now, with no proper seeding in the playoffs, no proper seeding in the groups, that you can make it to a final with a few Hail Marys and a little bit of luck. Maybe a lot of luck. But anyways, I thought we'd go through just how these teams got here. So starting off with Gambit, obviously in the group stages, they went 3-0. They beat Mouse on Inferno. 16-10. I got the information right here. Clearly, I mean, Gambit have shown that they can play Inferno quite well, which is very interesting going into the final because Immortals can as well. So, gonna be really interesting if we get Inferno as a decider or something like that. Then Gambit went on to beat G2 on Cash, a G2 that we saw in this major. I mean, Kenny S, one of the worst performances in a long time. And, of course, they didn't show up with a T-side. So how are you going to beat the likes of, well, any good, top-level team without a T-side? You're never going to beat SK. You're never going to beat Astralis. FaZe proved, that something was going on. But in theory, you're not going to beat them without a T-side. You're not going to beat teams like Gambit without a T-side even. Because Gambit have shown that they have a stellar CT side, they have a stellar T side. That's all you need, right? So if, you rely that heavily upon CT sides like G2 does, we saw G2 relying on their T side heavily against Navi, of course, in that Overpass game, where they edged out 16-14 after being down 12-3 on the T side. Obviously looked just completely lost. But yeah, you're going to need a good T side. And G2 didn't show up with one, so, Then, of course, Gambit beat VP on Train to decide their quarterfinal fate. So, just looking at these three teams, I mean, in theory, G2 was supposed to be a matchup that's quite impressive. Possibly, top 4 in the world. Have proven to be, especially ESL Pro League, that they're a title-winning team, but at this major, that just wasn't the case. Body had a god-awful tournament. Kenny S wasn't showing up at all. So, as impressive as it may look on paper, that Gambit beat G2 in the group stage in a best-of-1, it isn't really that impressive. On cash, that should definitely favor G2, you know. Gambit, as long as Gambit realize that they faced off versus a weak G2 and don't pick it versus Immortals, I'm fine with that. But honestly, not that impressive. And the group runs, I mean, obviously you can't do anything of the fact that it's best of ones and they got the draw that they did, so it's not their fault, of course. But then getting Mouse, you know, challenger team, sure, they've risen slightly in the rankings, but nowhere near, you know, that upper echelon of teams that you'd expect you'd have to beat to get to a major grand final, right? And then, of course, VP on Train. I mean, VP at this point were 2-0, and as proven by their semifinal versus Immortals, I think that, sure, I mean, I hate this notion that, you know, VP at majors, whatever, but I think that possibly because it was in Poland, there was some, I don't know, surge of motivation that just had to get them to that stage and at least play 2 series in front of the home crowd. So, you know, in all honesty, I think this VP performance was an anomaly, and definitely not if you look at that semifinal. They looked deflated as hell. I think everything went into that quarterfinal versus North. But, yeah, VP on Train, not that impressive. So, just to get to the quarterfinals, they've beaten 3 teams that are like, okay. I mean, this is not too telling, right? Then they get to the quarterfinals versus Fnatic. And that first game was killer. I mean, JW was hitting all kinds of shots. He just, you know, went back to his 2013, 2014 days, you know, where he was just banging people. So that was an interesting game. Obviously a 16-14, but at the end of the day, it's Fnatic, right? We know the issues that Fnatic have had. They've looked way better than they have these past few months, and they have, you know, steadily risen to a better level of Counter-Strike and a better playstyle, but they're just not there yet, obviously, and, well, they fell short, obviously, on that Inferno game where Doja just went fucking ham. So, you know, that kind of gave them a lifeline. I don't know. Like, honestly, that game, I mean, I even went through it in my prediction. I thought that Fnatic were going to win. Sure, so they, in my opinion, they were underdogs going into that game, but I definitely thought it would be close. Because it's difficult knowing just, you know, at what capacity Fnatic go into a playoff right now, not having been in them for quite a while. So, who the hell knows, but they managed to edge that out 2-0, so that's impressive. But Fnatic, it's still not, you know, that... It's not God-tier Counter-Strike. It's not that next-level Counter-Strike that they're facing when they face Fnatic. So they do manage to edge Fnatic out, which, sure, okay, now you have a best-of-3 series win. That's something, at least, but it's versus Fnatic, so you haven't convinced me just yet. Then they go into the semis versus Astralis. All right? Lord Almighty, who would have expected Gambit to beat Astralis in a best-of-3? Now they did. They beat them 2-1, obviously taking them on Overpass, or they played Overpass, Inferno, and Train, rather. And that Overpass game, yes, they beat Astralis on Overpass. That is fucking impressive. But honestly, Astralis, pretty much in the entire series, apart from that Inferno game, looked kind of deflated. I don't know what was going on, but on that Overpass game, I will hand it to Gambit. Yes, you won Overpass versus Astralis. That is fucking impressive. But at the same time, one of the key factors was Mo going absolutely ham, getting 33 frags, 11 deaths. Now, in my opinion, you could look at this and say, wow, Gambit beat Astralis in a best-of-3. At the same time, you have to take a look at that Overpass game and evaluate it, and just... It's almost what Astralis did to SK, you know? Device could rarely be impactful. Mo just going ham, and we know, like, this is an anomaly, in my opinion. Mo getting 33 frags and just completely fucking bodying Astralis, right? So, I don't value the result that much in terms of what it tells me about Gambit as a team going into another series, because it was an anomaly. Mo has never put up 33 frags and 11 deaths before, especially not in a major semifinal. And it's probably never going to happen again. So, while it was necessary for them to make it to the finals, when evaluating how they will do in the finals, and the team in general, just evaluating their major run, from a bird's eye perspective, retrospectively, just looking at it as basic overview, like, you can't overvalue that game too much with an anomaly like this. With an anomaly like that, yes, it was impressive, and I will give it to them. But honestly, that overpass game is an anomaly to me. Mo just 33 frags. Then obviously the second win of Astralis kicks in on Inferno. They take that very convincingly, and then on Train, of course, somewhat of a brawl there towards the end. But Zeus, he took a timeout by the later stages of the game. I believe it was, I can't exactly remember, but he took an eco timeout, basically, where they were playing the eco round, but he was stood in spawn. They were discussing. Then he took a timeout instantly after that, and he just, I don't know what kind of motivational speech he laid down there, but it worked, and they took Train, and that was impressive. But Zeus top fragged on Train. And, it seems like Gambit, to make it to the finals, relied on some Hail Marys and some good draws in the group stages and even in the quarters, not getting the likes of fucking SK, Astralis. Even Virtus Pro might have, in the quarterfinals, given them somewhat of a problem. So they were kind of lucky with the draws, and obviously they played their hearts out and had some Hail Marys in that semifinal. And while they have shown brilliant Counter-Strike, and honestly, they're fundamentally sound, right? They're a tactical team. Zeus really impressing, showing us what he can do with, just taking this team. Gambit, who the hell were they before Zeus joined? Now he's taken them. They're a top-level team. They've gotten, obviously, that legend status, three majors in a row, and are now, well, at a major final. So, impressive run, but I wouldn't say that it's one of the great runs we've seen at a major. Definitely lucked out in some aspects, and relied on some Hail Marys when it came to those difficult matches. So, whatever. They're at a major final right now. Maybe they weren't tested as much as other teams, but that's what's going to happen when you have a system like this. So, Gambit are here. They're in the major final versus their opponents, Immortals. Now, you must be thinking to yourself, what the fuck, Immortals? Not SK. We have 5 Brazilians in the final, not SK. Immortals. And a simulation, obviously, in full effect. But how did Immortals get here? Well, in the groups, they obviously beat Vega on Train, 16-6. That just that fact is like, it was in the 0-1 bracket, and they get Vega, probably the worst team at this major. Clearly, that's a godsend for them, and there's nothing they can do. That's probably what you hope for, but to kick things off, the road to the major final starts with playing the worst team in the final, or in the at the major. So, whatever. It's the first game. They get that win. Then they go on to play Na'Vi on Overpass, and Na'Vi really tried to showcase their capabilities on Overpass, but it didn't really work out now, did it? The Na'Vi's T-side, just as G2's, looked like they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And we have, gotten confirmation since then that Na'Vi has had all kinds of fucking problems. That Seized interview, they were lying to each other. They were going to disband multiple times during the past 6 months. Who knows what the hell is going on in that team. So, definitely roster changes coming. Even Simple confirmed it. Seized said it was necessary. So, who knows? Anyway, that Na'Vi is a team in disarray, so winning out versus Na'Vi, sure, not overpasses Na'Vi's best map, but now that we've gotten to peer into the inner workings of Na'Vi a little bit, it's not that impressive, in my opinion. So you kind of win out playing a team like Na'Vi in total disarray. And then, as a decider match, when you are 2-2, out of all the teams you could have gotten, like G2, like Fnatic, like VP, like Cloud9, you get Flipside. Flipside Tactics. Now, yet again, what a fucking lucky draw. So who knows if Immortals would even be here. Obviously, they've proven that they can play some amazing Counter-Strike, but the opposition hasn't been that impressive at all. So, in a way, I mean, you could speculate and say that, well, sure, Immortals has shown to be, or has impressed with their brand of Counter-Strike now. I mean, obviously, KNG going off, Henny's had his moments, but also not had his moments. But everyone has had their 5 minutes in the spotlight this major. Steel has had it. Obviously, on that Inferno game versus Big. Steel. Bolts has had it multiple times on Train versus Big. He had it just now on Mirage versus VP. Lucas has had it. He had it on Inferno versus VP. And KNG throughout has just been a killer. So, you know, they've definitely proven that all the parts are oiled up and you know, they're working. So, and at the same time, when you do it versus opposition that is, you know, not the best or kind of middling, it might create an illusion. You know, what happens when they go against, you know, the strongest teams in the world? Who knows? Because they haven't really played any here at the major, which is very interesting that they can get to the finals of a major not playing like any top 5 team. Obviously not their fault, but at the same time, I mean, you have to criticize their road here. And even if any of these teams wins the major, honestly, I'm not going to value it as much as an MLG Columbus, ISO 1 Cologne 2015, Katowice 2015, you know, previous majors. So definitely an asterisk, in my opinion, on this major, whoever wins. Obviously, Immortals then make it to the quarterfinals. Who do they face? Probably the best draw they could have had. Big. So Big and Immortals play each other in the quarterfinals. And on the other side of the bracket, SK and Astralis play each other in the quarterfinals. Well, how the hell did this happen? I've complained enough. Anyways, they play versus Big, and they play a killer game on Cobblestone that they end up losing because Legaia somehow in the series just went absolutely ham. Legaia had a killer series, and very impressive. Honestly, Big's run at this major, impressive as hell. Obviously, Tabson in the group stage, then Tabson in the series in the quarterfinals was, apart from that final Train game, was not showing up at all. I mean, he had 0 kills or 1 kill on that first half of Inferno, right? So you're like, the hell is going on here? Who knows? But Legaia made up for it. Gob B has been, you know, for the type of in-game leader that he is, very controlling, very methodical, has been fragging decently well, you know, enough. He's fragged what the team requires of him, basically. And I think even Kiev, especially in that quarterfinal and in the groups as well, proved that, you know, he can definitely op. So, impressive run from Big, but they fall short versus Immortals. Obviously, Immortals schooling them on Inferno. Everyone thought, you know, Big was a lock to take that game. But the NIP syndrome didn't really take effect in that Inferno game because Big just looked lost. I mean, it was basically, that Inferno game was just Legaia trying to, you know, keep them in it. So, who knows what the hell happened because Tabson was not there. Obviously, Legaia losing out on that pistol clutch in the second half, which was unfortunate. And then Tabson and him had quite the argument. So, it might have been that, might have been nerves. Who the hell knows? Immortals pick Inferno up very comfortably, however. And so they move on to Train. Now, what a game this was. Was one of the most tense games of Counter-Strike I think I've ever won or watched. Sorry, I'm kind of riled up because this major is quite interesting and surprising. But this Train game ends up being 16-14. And Immortals basically win out due to a blunder made by Big in the 24th round, I think, when Immortals went for a Tech 9 rush kind of tactic, and obviously Big being on the full buy should win that one, lose it out, get their economy ruined, lose 3 rounds in a row, and then eventually Immortals just, close it out. So unfortunate for Big, but Immortals, they take the series and they move on to the semis. Best draw they could have had in Big. It was definitely close, but they managed to edge them out. Then, of course, in the semifinals, just watched it, Immortals face off versus the hometown heroes of Virtus Pro. Now we heard the roars of the crowd, the chants, but clearly it wasn't enough for Virtus Pro. Immortals come in looking strong as hell. Now, the reason they look strong as hell was, first of all, they get, I wouldn't say momentum between games, but I'd say, they definitely, get their confidence up on that Inferno game. Now, honestly, I don't know, VP don't play Inferno. So that first game isn't impressive to me. Immortals, you've clearly proven themselves to know what they're doing on Inferno and have the roster to be incredibly skilled, and if things are rolling, just body teams. They have that potential. They have a very high skill ceiling, of course. And playing Virtus Pro, a team that just doesn't play Inferno. In the last 3 months, they have nothing on LAN on Inferno. They just haven't played it. I think they've played it 3 times in 2017, right? They played it in the beginning of the year when it was new, tried it out, wasn't for them. So, it's definitely one of the worst maps for VP. So, yeah. Immortals completely wrecked them on that map. Then, what I will say is, Immortals going in on Mirage, that was definitely an impressive game. But, yet again, VP looked deflated as hell. They gave Immortals an incredible lead. Immortals playing very strong defaults, incredibly strong defaults, and VP just not capitalizing, never went for CT aggression. And when they did go for CT aggression, there was that round where 3 members of Virtus Pro on separate parts of the maps, go for a rush, and Immortals just pick off 3 guys at the same time. Boom. There was no trading. There was no team play on that CT side. There was no proper CT aggression to disrupt the incredibly strong Immortals default. So even despite having the crowd on their side, VP just looked like they didn't know what they were doing on that Mirage game, and definitely didn't know what they were doing on Inferno because they don't play it. So, I mean, Immortals beat out a very lackluster VP, a VP that might have just made it here because of, the prospect of playing in front of the Polish crowd. But when it got to playing a team that is somewhat well-oiled and firing on all cylinders, well, they just couldn't do anything. It was basically a few antics from Snacks and Pasha that even got them rounds on the board, it felt like. So, now we're here. Immortals versus Gambit in the final. Now, I mean, who the fuck did Immortals beat to get here? For Immortals, this is probably how it had to happen for them to make the finals, right? You give them any other team in that final round of the group stage in the Swiss system, and God only knows what the hell happens. Immortals might not even be in the playoffs. Then, of course, they draw Big and a deflated Virtus Pro. Wouldn't say I'm too impressed with the run, and a definite asterisk if Immortals were to win the major, because now they're in the finals versus Gambit, a team that also obviously clearly had a much more difficult road to the final. And if anyone, is deserving of, or if anyone deserves this final more, I'd say it's Gambit, just considering the road they had to tread to get here. But we're here now, and I mean, who knows, right? To know or to be able to predict who might win this game, we have to go into the possible vetoes and the maps they might play. So I drafted a imaginary veto here, the way that I predict it will go, and from that I will attempt to derive a result or a prediction. So I have Immortals banning Nuke. Now Gambit have played Nuke in the past 3 months, and they don't have a terrible record on it. And obviously, being a CIS team, it feels like CIS teams on Nuke, for some reason, have a game plan going into it, So, Immortals just don't play Nuke, so, and Gambit probably could be able to do something on Nuke. That's just going to eliminate Nuke. Immortals are going to ban Nuke, basically. Then I have Gambit banning Mirage. Gambit do not have the best record on Mirage. I believe it's something like 50% or something in that kind of area. Immortals have proven that they definitely have a plan on Mirage. They play the CT side amazingly. They know, like, for example, they know when to peek, how to, like, flashing for each other, playing CT aggression really well, and of course they have stellar defaults on the T side. Now, I don't think Gambit at all have a game plan really going into Mirage. I don't think they play it. I don't think Mirage or Gambit has played Mirage at all in the past 3 months. So I think what Immortals has shown and their strength on Mirage, I don't think Gambit, considering that it's one of the worst maps for Gambit, I don't think they're going to go to that. So that's just going to be a ban from Gambit straight away. Now, next up is Immortals pick. And I think Immortals are going to pick Cash. Because Gambit don't really play Cash. And Immortals, obviously, their playstyle being, that talent-heavy, somewhat aggressive, very good defaults, and with their double-up setup, is definitely going to be able to play Cash, right? Play one on the B side, you play one on the A side, you could obviously also play one up in mid. Now, I think that Immortals are definitely going to edge out. Like, first of all, Cash isn't a good map for Gambit, and I just think that Cash is such a good map for the way that Immortals play Counter-Strike, especially considering they have, in terms of potential and skill ceiling and form, Immortals probably has one of the best double op setups in the world, and the double op can definitely do work on Cash. So I think that Immortals are going to pick Cash, and I think that Immortals will probably win Cash versus Gambit. Then I think that Gambit are going to pick Train. Train, obviously the best map for Gambit. They have an 80% win rate on it on LAN in the past 3 months. So I think, despite it being a good map for Immortals, I think that, honestly, Immortals probably edge out Gambit in this veto, because it seems like the maps that Gambit play, Immortals have proven they can play as well. Now, Immortals, their map pool is kind of an illusion, because it relies heavily, obviously, Train, a very op-heavy map. Immortals, they have all the opping they need. But that's the case with many maps, so it's either going to be, the surprising thing is that Gambit got here without playing Cobblestone once in this major. So who knows, just how good their Cobblestone is. Maybe Gambit have practiced Cobblestone. And we already know that it probably hasn't gone well because, they said that the boot camp was terrible when they were scrimming. They couldn't win anything. And now they've gone into the major and they've done really well. So who knows? Are they going to go for that risk of playing Cobblestone, a map that Immortals definitely good on, which they proved versus Big. Despite losing that game, it was terribly close, obviously an overtime game, and Immortals have kind of warmed up on it. So who knows? Because what we know about Gambit is that their bootcamp was terrible going into this, so maps that they haven't played, who knows, right? So that's why I don't think that Gambit are going to risk it by playing, playing maps that they have historically been good on, Overpass, Cobblestone, obviously. I think that they're going to stick to what they know has worked at this major. Now, the question is, do they bring out either Inferno or Train as their first pick? Honestly, I think after how Immortals have played on Inferno lately and the fact that they've played it so much, who knows? Pick your poison, right? I think Gambit might have to go for something like a Cobblestone or an Overpass. They could probably take a lot from that Cobblestone game that Immortals played versus Big, and probably drive something from that. So I think that if Gambit want to win this final, I think that, you know, they can't risk it on a map like Train that Immortals have proven they can, you know, play incredibly comfortable on. Double ops. I mean, the thing about, you probably want to go to a map like Inferno, Cobblestone, maybe not so much. Like, you kind of want to avoid maps where double ops can be really strong for Immortals. So if Gambit pick Cobblestone, it's all going to be about on their T side taking drop and cutting off that rotation, right? So if they play double op, they can't rotate those ops and just lock down choke points. Now, what is my expectation? The same with Train. On the CT side, Immortals double op is insane. They proved it that they can retake that B bomb site with ops like it's nothing. Like 2v4s, boom, KNG, Henny, we got 2 ops, we're going to do this, and they just do it. So I don't know. If you're Gambit, what do you risk? Like, do you risk bringing out Train, Cobblestone, Overpass, or Inferno? It's a good question. Honestly, I think after... Oh, it's such a good question, because I don't know that you want to rely on or even trust your result versus Astralis on Overpass, because you basically had a player who just shut everything down. Who knows if Mo is going to be able to do that again? So it's questionable. It's a difficult pick for Gambit, right? I think that you go with probably a map in which double op isn't going to be the strongest, so probably an Overpass pick, Inferno maybe. I think that honestly Gambit might go for an Inferno, if I'm completely honest. That might be the one, or a Train. All right, this is a difficult one actually. Like, what do you go for if you're Gambit? Like, you have so many choices, but the question is, here you probably want to pick what's strongest for you and what's weakest for Immortals, right? And out of these maps, hell, I think you might go for an Overpass, actually. I think Gambit are going to pick Overpass here. They've been historically amazing on it. They've shown that, you know, they have the ability to beat the likes of Astralis' best Overpass team in the world on this map. I think Gambit go for Overpass as their first pick. And then, obviously, Immortals need to ban a map. I honestly think after their loss and playing an overtime game versus Big, I think Immortals are going to ban Cobblestone, probably. Gambit, historically good on the map. I think that Immortals are way too comfortable on the likes of Train and Inferno to let, you know, Gambit pick Cobblestone. A map that they know that Gambit are historically very comfortable on, and there's no information on it yet. So I think that if you're Immortals, you probably ban Cobblestone, which leaves either Train or Inferno for Gambit to pick. Now, where do we go here? I think we probably go to Inferno. And I hope that Gambit take a look at the VP game that Immortals had versus them on Inferno and say, VP don't play Inferno, so why, you know, let's give them that sense, like, or that false sense of confidence on Inferno. We'll pick it versus you, and we can play Inferno. We have proven that we can play Inferno. Let's play you on Inferno, because I don't think you want to play Train versus Immortals just because of how op-heavy that map is. And Gambit have to know that when it comes to opping, Immortals got you beat, man. You need something. You need to win this through tactics and, you know, stronger defaults, more sensible CT aggression, just a smarter brand of Counter-Strike in general. And I think that if Gambit, you know, leave it to Inferno, which means that we would have Cash, Overpass, and Inferno, I mean, obviously, I think that Immortals are going to have quite the advantage going in with a 1-0, which they'll probably get if they play Cash. The two last maps are kind of up for grabs. I mean, Overpass, I would have to edge out Gambit. I feel like it being such a tactical map and Gambit having such strong defaults. I mean, Immortals also have strong defaults, don't get me wrong, but I feel like Gambit has way more rabbits they can pull out of the hat, you know? Immortals kind of relies on those strong defaults, and, you know, if Gambit has some pretty good CT aggression, I think that they can, you know, stop Immortals in their tracks, end those defaults, get those man advantages, and then just with good bomb site setups, probably take out Immortals T-side pretty comfortably, and then go in with, you know, in case their own defaults, you know, get shut down. I think that they have the set plays to really grind a game out. So I think that Gambit probably take Overpass, to be honest, and then Inferno. I think it's going to be a hell of a game. It would probably be an amazingly close game. And, I mean, we obviously know that CT aggression is difficult on Inferno. So that means that both teams are going to have a difficult time going for that CT aggression and shutting down the defaults of both of each other. So I think it's going to be an all-out brawl if it goes to Inferno. I think it's going to be a close map, and I think it's going to be a good map. So hopefully it ends with Inferno and somewhat of a coin toss, in my opinion. It really depends. I mean, it's such a cop-out thing to say, but Immortals have proven that, wow, the entire team can, you know, really show up, fire on all cylinders, at a major, in the playoffs. I mean, they just showed it in the semis, so it's pretty much pick your poison, right? Do you want the veteran savvy of Gambit, or do you want the young blazing guns of Immortals? And major final, I might have to edge out Gambit on that one. I think the veteran savvy, the coldness of just of experience will win out in this one, especially Immortals going into this knowing that, holy shit, we're in a major final. So much is riding on this. All the glory, all the prestige. I think that Gambit's veteran, the veteran essence will win out and win them the major final, thus making them the PGL Major Krakow final winners. What a storyline that would be. Well, we know that this major has been a shit show so far, so maybe Immortals take it and come in not having made a single major prior to this, obviously as an organization, and well, yeah, just win the entire thing. Wouldn't that be something? So yeah, let's see. Peace out.